10.000 años antes del nacimiento de Paul Atreides, antes de que el universo nos conociera como las Bene Gesserit, fundamos una hermandad.
Hi, Ori, I'm Rafa from Cartelera, Spain. How are you today?
Hi, I'm good, thank you. Nice to meet you.
Yeah, nice to meet you too. And congratulations on your work in this big production. Your Empress is driven by ambition, like the other characters. But it occurs to me, similar to Lady Jessica and Rebecca Ferguson in the movies, that, despite her darkness, I find it hard to determine if she's good or evil or if I care about it. So how did you see your character in that light?
Well, one thing I love about the Dune universe is that the characters are always, certainly in our series, very morally ambiguous. And I think as an actor, that's a real pleasure to play. It's so much more interesting than a character, who feels as if we know exactly who they are and where they are, and that there is something kind of moralistic about them. So I think it's good that we ask that question, because I think that it's far more intriguing. And I think the characters are constantly defying expectation, and Natalya in particular defies our expectations. She has a really interesting character arc and journey throughout the course of this series, and some really intriguingly unexpected things happen. So I think there's a lot to look forward in the evolution of her character.
Yeah, totally. And also another thing unusual in these blockbuster productions is that there's not only women as main characters, but also as the showrunner, as the director, as the writer. So in what ways do you think this story has benefited from that female perspective, and how did you perceive that while shooting with the team?
Well, what I love about this series is that the writing of these female parts is they're all such incredibly strong, complex, compelling characters, and it really gives you a different take and angle on the sci-fi world, and it brings it back home to, in a way, where it started. Where would we be without China Melville? I think that sci-fi has traditionally been a genre in which women writers are able to ask the question, what if? What if the world were a matriarchy? What if society were defined by women being in power? And I think certainly as a young girl growing up, I would have loved to have seen a series like this. So for me, it's a real landmark, because it gives a sense of these really important questions being asked. How do women use power? How does a young girl find her voice, find her power? And personally, I would love to see more of this. So it's a privilege to join this kind of a female cast. Emily Watson is one of my acting heroes. So that alone, feels like a real honor to be a part of this project.
Yeah, I mean, those big topics are part of the DNA of the Dune, so it's really great to see that here. And also comparing this show with others massive production that you worked on, like Game of Thrones a little bit, or The Witcher, for example. What did you learn from those big projects, and how was the scope of this production, familiar or surprising for you in comparison with those other projects?
Oh, I think what's really different about this production is that so often with a drama that's based in a sort of fantasy or a sci-fi world, the human can get lost, and sometimes you can feel that the human stories are lost within a concept, because this kind of world is so high concept. But I think that's what makes this show unique, is that the human stories, the human relationships, the detailed emotional journeys that characters go on are as important as the concept. And maybe that is something that comes from women being behind the lens or in the writer's room, or telling these stories from a female perspective. But there is as much importance in this series given to, the emotional subtext of what is going on in a scene, as there is, for example, to, the kind of design and imaginative process around creating this universe. And I think that is what really sets it apart.
Mm, yeah, I mean, I really love that woman perspective that you were talking about because you see it, and I really wonder how do you think people will perceive or receive those characters? Because there's this famous quote from Taylor Swift that says that if a man does something, it's strategic, but if a woman does the same thing, it's perceived as calculated. So how do you think the great audience will perceive both the men and the woman characters and their ambition in this series?
Well, I think for a start, what's really interesting is that, speaking from my character's perspective, when we encounter the Emperor and the Empress, those gender roles are completely flipped. We traditionally associate strength and power with, the male leader, and we don't associate that necessarily with perhaps the Empress in terms of how we are used to seeing this kind of royal family portrayed traditionally on screen. So that, for a start, gives us a whole new way in and a really fresh perspective, I think. Yeah, and I just think, to be honest with you, all of the characters they're so complex, that I think whether they are male or female, they are kind of endlessly fascinating because in a way the point about this universe is that you can't really trust anyone.
Mm. Yeah, that was a lovely conversation. Thank you for your answers and for being here with all of us, Jody.
Thank you. You're welcome.